alone in the ash field. She had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. The air was full of smoke and dust. The sky above was not blue. It was gray, covered with clouds that never moved. Long ago, this place was green and full of life. Now it was silent, burned, and broken. Only ash remained. Kayla ran through the empty field. Her feet were bare. Her long silver cloak was torn. Her hands were shaking, covered in dry blood and dirt. She didn't stop to rest. She didn't stop to breathe, because her child was gone. She had lost her daughter, Lila, during the raid. Machines fell from the sky. Loud blasts shook the ground. Buildings exploded. People screamed. Kayla held her child close, running through the smoke. But then the ground split. Her foot slipped. Her head hit stone. When she woke, her child was gone. Now she was running with nothing but hope and pain. "Lila," she cried out into the wind. "Please answer me." No reply, only silence. The ash field was wide and full of dead trees. No birds, no insects, no voices. She fell to her knees. Her body was weak. Her arms hung heavy at her sides. Her throat burned from crying and her heart felt empty. "Anyone," she whispered. "Please, help me." No one came. Her people had already escaped. They believed. The field was cursed. No ships would land here again. No help would arrive. Kayla leaned against a broken log and closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She had never felt so alone. But then, she heard something. Not a sound from the sky. Not a scream. It was soft, like metal clicking against metal. Her eyes opened. A shape appeared through the ash. It moved slowly, carefully, not like a beast, not like a machine, like a man. Her body tensed. She reached for the small blade on her hip and pulled it out. She stood up, ready to defend herself. The figure stepped closer. He wore a cracked helmet and a torn Earth Army suit. Dirt covered his chest and arms. One leg dragged slightly. He looked tired, but not weak. A human. Kayla pointed her blade. "Stay away," she shouted. The human stopped. He raised both hands slowly to show he meant no harm. Kayla's mind raced. Why was a human here? Had they come back to finish the job? To take her life too? But then, he knelt down. He didn't say a word. He just reached into a small pack on his side. Kayla took a step back, blade still up. He pulled something out. Small. Soft. He set it on the ground and pushed it toward her gently. Kayla's breath stopped. It was a tiny boot. A child's boot. Lila's boot. Her knees gave out. She fell to the ground and picked it up with shaking fingers. Where did you get this?" she asked. The human didn't answer. But he slowly took off his helmet. His face was pale, bruised, tired. His eyes were green, full of pain, but also calm. He pointed to the east. Then he reached into the pack again and showed her a small locket. Open, with a picture. Her daughter. Kayla covered her mouth with her hands. Her chest shook with shock and hope. This stranger, this human, had seen Lila. "She's alive?" Kayla asked. The man nodded. A sound escaped Kayla's throat, half sob, half laugh. She looked at him again. He didn't smile. He didn't move closer. He only waited. Carefully, she lowered her blade. The human pointed again to the east, then tapped his chest. He stood up, slow and steady, and began to walk. After a moment, Kayla stood too, and followed. They didn't speak. But for the first time in hours, she wasn't alone, and for the first time since the raid, there was hope. The silent soldier. She had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. They moved through the ash field together, one step at a time. Kayla kept her eyes on the human walking ahead, Of her. His name was still unknown, but his actions spoke louder than words. He didn't turn around often, only enough to make sure she was still behind him. His left leg dragged slightly, and now that she was closer, she noticed blood had dried along the seam of his uniform. The wound looked old, but not treated. He was injured, yet he moved with purpose. Calm. Like someone who had done this before. Kayla's heart was a storm of emotions. Her daughter's boot was still in her hand, warm from her grip. She wanted to run ahead and demand answers. Where is she? Is she safe? But she knew he wouldn't answer. Not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't. The human was mute, or maybe just silent by choice. They stopped under a collapsed transport bridge. Half of it lay broken across a dried-out riverbed, jagged like cracked bones. It offered shade and a moment of rest. Kayla sat against a metal beam, chest rising and falling slowly. She watched the human drop his pack, kneel and begin cleaning a small scratch on his hand with a cloth soaked in water from a canister. After a moment, she spoke. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't reply. She tried again. "What's your name?" The human looked at her, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a small strip of plastic. A name was burned into it, faded from battle. Jace. Kayla read it slowly, then looked at him. Jace. He nodded once. "You found my daughter?" He pulled out the picture again. Her daughter, Leela, curled up in a blanket, sleeping. The background looked like a storage shelter, half lit, maybe underground. Kayla's hand went to her mouth again. This is from today?" Jace pointed to the ground, then drew a line in the dust. He scratched 3 small dots, then circled them. Kayla realized he was marking time. 3 hours ago. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were different. She wiped them away and looked at Jace with fresh understanding. "You didn't just find her," she thought. "You stayed with her, you protected her, and now you're guiding me back to her." She watched him check a small scanner on his wrist. It blinked red. Something was nearby. "Danger?" she asked. He nodded. He grabbed his rifle, checked it, and pointed, "Southeast." Kayla stood. "We go?" Jace gave one slow nod. They moved again, this time quicker, quieter. They kept to the ruins, moving between burned trees and shattered walls. Old machines lay half buried in the dirt, their metal skeletons rusted and useless. They reached a rise in the land. Jace held out his arm, stopping her. He lay flat, peeked over the ridge, then pulled back. He motioned for her to stay low and handed her his small scanner. Kayla looked. Down below was a scavenger camp. Rusted vehicles, crates stacked around power, cores, and in the center, cages. One cage held a small figure, curled up, not moving. Her breath caught. "Leela." Jace placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She turned to him, eyes wide, full of fear and rage. "We get her," she whispered. He gave a small smile, his first one, and nodded. Then he pointed to his chest, then to hers, then to the child, together. The trail of cries. She had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. The sky darkened as night slowly crept across the ash field. The camp below flickered with low orange lights, salvaged energy, panels rigged to power scavenger tools and cages. From above the ridge, Kayla lay beside Jace, her eyes fixed on the small cage where her daughter was locked. The child inside shifted slightly. A hand moved. A small sob escaped. Kayla's heart broke all over again. "She's scared," she whispered. "She thinks I left her." Jace didn't reply, but his eyes showed understanding. Deep, sharp understanding. He had seen this before, maybe more times than he could count. He slowly drew a rough map in the dirt between them, showing the scavenger camp's layout. 3 guards, 2 outside the main hut, 1 asleep beside a weapon rack. The cage was unguarded, but surrounded by motion sensors. Kayla understood it was not about breaking in. It was about not alerting the others. Jace pulled a small chip from his pack, a jammer. Weak, short range, but good enough for one burst. He pointed to the left side of the camp, where the fence was broken, wires hanging useless. Then he pointed to himself, then back to the right side. "You want to split?" Kayla asked. He nodded once. "No," she said. "I go too." Jace studied her. Then, to her surprise, he handed her a small tool, round, black, and humming slightly. A sonic disruptor. Lightweight, meant for distraction. She took it, nodded, and crawled backwards with him from the ridge. They moved like shadows. Around rocks, under ruined walls, through grass that barely moved in the dead wind. When they reached the fence, Kayla slipped through the broken section while Jace circled wide to the other side of the camp. Her heart pounded with each step. The sound of her child's soft whimpers guided her. Closer. Closer. She crouched behind an old crate and waited. And then, pop. A soft pulse lit the far side of the camp. The guards turned, confused. Kayla took her chance. She ran to the cage, breath held. "Lila," she whispered. The child opened her eyes slowly. "Mama?" The voice was cracked. Tired. Kayla sobbed softly, grabbed the lock, and used the tool Jace gave her. It buzzed, then clicked. The cage swung open. Kayla scooped Lila into her arms. The girl was light. Too light. But warm. Still breathing. Jace appeared from the shadows, rifle ready. He gave a thumbs up and pointed back the way they came. But they didn't make it far. Click. A sensor on the ground, lit red. The camp lights flared, to full power. An alarm screamed. "Run!" Kayla shouted, clutching her daughter. Blaster fire lit the dark. Jace fired back, hitting a scavenger in the leg. They ran through smoke and panic. The child wrapped tightly in Kayla's arms. One scavenger got close. Too close. He raised his blade, but Jace was faster. He slammed into the man, knocking him down. He didn't kill him. Just enough to stop him. They reached the fence, ducked under, and disappeared into the dark ash field beyond. Hours later, hidden in the ruins of an old shelter, Kayla lay beside her daughter, who was finally asleep. Jace sat nearby, guarding the door. Kayla looked at him through the firelight. "You risked your life," she said. "Again." He didn't respond. "You could have left me after giving me the boot. You could have taken her and flown off. But you didn't." Still no reply. So she crawled closer, holding Lila's hand. "You're not just a soldier, are you?" Jace stared at the flames, his jaw clenched. Kayla whispered, "You're something else." He didn't speak. But this time she understood. He wasn't silent because he was empty. He was silent because he had lost too much. Between life and loyalty, she had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. The ruins were quiet. Wind moved softly through the broken beams, carrying the dry scent of old fire and metal. The shelter where they had hidden was once part of a medical outpost, long abandoned after the first wave of attacks. Broken equipment lay scattered on the floor, old stretchers, smashed tablets, empty canisters. Kayla sat with her daughter wrapped in her arms. Lila was asleep now, her small face resting against Kayla's chest, breathing soft and slow. It was the first peace the child had known in days. Across the room, Jace stood near the open wall, scanning the dark with his weapon ready. He didn't rest. His body was still, but alert. His eyes moved with focus, every sound, every flicker of light in the distance. He saw it before she could even notice. Kayla whispered, "You haven't slept, have you?" Jace looked at her, then shook his head once. She stared at him in the firelight. "You won't even let yourself rest." He looked away, his jaw tight. Kayla gently shifted Lila to a blanket, kissed her forehead, and stood. She walked to Jace slowly and stood beside him, looking out over the wasteland. "You saved us," she said. "You didn't have to." He shrugged. You were given orders, weren't you? She asked. To leave. To evacuate. Jace reached into his suit and pulled out a small communicator, cracked and silent. He tapped the broken screen. It blinked, then went black again. You cut it off? Kayla asked. He nodded. Why? He paused, then reached into his pack again. He pulled out something small and delicate, a photograph. Kayla looked closer. It showed a human woman and a little boy, smiling on a green hill. The woman had the same eyes as Jace. The boy was holding a toy ship. She saw the truth in his face. He had lost someone. Family. Maybe his own child. Kayla's voice trembled. Your son? Jace nodded slowly, then tucked the photo away. He had stayed behind on this ruined world. Not for orders. Not for duty. But because he had once lost what she almost lost, he couldn't let it happen again. Her eyes filled with tears, not of fear this time, but of something deeper. Respect, gratitude, and pain. I used to think your kind had no heart, she whispered, but I was wrong. Jace gave her a long look. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. Just then, Leela stirred. Mama, she whispered. My arm hurts. Kyla rushed to her side. She checked her daughter's arm. It was swollen, red, possibly infected. She's burning, Kayla said quickly. Her fever's rising. She turned to Jace. She needs medicine, or she won't last the night. Jace was already moving. He opened a broken storage crate and began searching. Kayla joined him. Together they dug through boxes, old cases, crushed medkits finally. Jace found it, a sealed injector with a green label. He showed it to her. Kayla's eyes widened. That's the Lexin. It's perfect. But as she reached for it, Jace held it back. He tapped the injector, then tapped the inside of his arm. There was only one dose. He had been saving it. For himself. Kayla stepped back, stunned. You're sick? He didn't answer, just nodded once. Then without a word, he handed her the injector. No, she said, shaking her head. You need it too. Jace knelt beside Leela and gently placed the medicine in Kayla's hand. Then he stepped away. Kayla stared at him. You would give your only cure to a child you don't even know? Jace looked at her, and for the first time, he spoke. His voice was rough, quiet. She's not just a child. She's someone's child. Kayla stared at him in shock. It was just one sentence, but it said everything. She injected Lila with the medicine. Within minutes, the child's breathing eased. The fever started to fall. Kayla sat back, her hands shaking. You gave everything, she said. Jace just closed his eyes, leaned against the wall, and finally let his body rest. He didn't sleep, but his guard dropped. For the first time, Kayla sat beside him, silent, watching over him the way he had watched over her and Lila. And in that broken, quiet shelter surrounded by dust and memory, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't romance. Not yet. Not hope. Not yet. But something stronger. Trust. The price of mercy. She had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. The sky above the ash field turned orange as dawn approached. Weak light slipped through the broken ceiling of the shelter, touching the floor where Jace now sat, head leaning against the wall, his eyes half closed. Sleep had not come, but exhaustion had dulled the pain in his limbs. Kayla sat nearby, her arms wrapped around Leela, who was still asleep. The child's fever had gone down. Her breathing was soft now, peaceful. But Kayla's eyes were fixed on Jace. His skin looked pale. Sweat clung to his forehead. The wound on his side, which he had tried to hide, was bleeding again. Slowly, silently, she moved to his side and crouched down. You need help, she said softly. Jace opened one eye and gave a weak shake of the head. He tried to stand, but his leg trembled. Kayla caught his arm, holding him steady. You gave her the medicine, she whispered. Now you're burning. He didn't answer. Kayla reached into her own belt pouch. She had little, mostly tools, string and dried food. But tucked deep inside was a small tube of stinger sap. Her people used it to slow infection and reduce internal bleeding. "This isn't much," she said, "but it might buy us time." Jace nodded slowly. She applied the paste gently to his wound. His body flinched, muscles tightening, but he didn't make a sound. His silence was no longer strange to her. Now it meant something else. Control. Pain without panic. Strength without sound. When she finished, he leaned back and whispered, "Thank you." She smiled. I should be the one saying that. They rested for another hour, but they knew time was not on their side. Scavengers would come searching, and Jace's condition was getting worse. Kyla looked down at her daughter, then at the man beside her. "We can't stay here," she said. "But you can't walk far either." Jace pulled out a small beacon from his bag. He hesitated, then handed it to her. "What is this?" Kayla asked. He pointed up, then made a motion like wings. "A rescue signal." Her eyes widened. "You had a way out this whole time?" He nodded. "Why didn't you use it sooner?" He touched his heart, then pointed at her, and at Leela. Kayla understood. He waited to use it, until he knew the child was safe. She held the beacon in her hands, unsure. If they activated it now, a human dropship would come. But the scavengers had listening tech. They might intercept. They might come first. Jace saw the worry on her face. He stood weakly but with purpose. Then he reached for his weapon. "No," Kayla said, stepping in front of him. "You can't fight like this." But he simply looked at her and mouthed one word: "Decoy." Her eyes filled with panic. "You're going to draw them away?" He nodded once. Kayla shook her head. "You'll die." He raised his hand in a slow gesture as if to say, "Maybe, but you won't." Then he handed her the final piece of his strength, his dog tag, the small metal strip with his name on it. Jace Morrow. He pressed it into her hand gently. Kayla stared at it, speechless. "You're not doing this alone," she said. But he was already gone, moving out into the ruins, limping but strong, like a ghost born of dust and fire. 15 minutes later, distant gunfire echoed across the ash field. Kayla held Leela close, the beacon blinking in her hand. Her breath came in fast, shaking gasps, and then blaster sounds fell silent. For a moment all was still, then a loud hum filled the sky. She looked up, a dropship, human colors. She stood waving her arms. They landed fast. Soldiers rushed out, weapons, drawn, eyes scanning. "Kyla of the Relari people?" one shouted. She nodded, clutching her daughter. "We're here to evacuate." "Where's the soldier who sent the signal?" Her mouth opened, but no words came. Jace was not with them. He hadn't returned. She stared at the empty horizon and whispered, "He stayed behind. For us." The soldier looked confused, but waved her toward the ship. Kyla stepped in, holding Leela tight, but in her other hand she clutched the metal tag. She didn't cry. Not yet, because she didn't believe he was gone. Not yet. The return nobody expected. She had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. The rescue ship broke through the ash clouds like a silver bird. Engines roared low, slicing the silence that had ruled the wastelands for days. Inside the cabin, Kayla sat near a window, her daughter asleep in her lap. Lila's small arms were wrapped tightly around her mother's waist, face pressed into her cloak. But Kayla's eyes were fixed on the ground below. They had taken off without Jace. He had disappeared into the ruins to draw the scavengers away, and now all that remained of him was the metal tag in her hand. Jace Morrow. She kept tracing the letters with her thumb, again and again. Not ready to let go, not ready to believe he was gone. One of the human soldiers sat across from her. His face was young, but tired. "You knew the corporal?" he asked. Kayla looked up, He saved my daughter, she said. And he gave his last dose of medicine to her instead of using it on himself. The soldier's eyes widened. He did that? She nodded. He disobeyed direct orders, turned off his comm, went into the field alone. Her voice was steady now. Not to fight, but to protect. The soldier looked down. His hands gripped the rifle in his lap. He was like that, he whispered. Quiet, stubborn, but always first to jump into danger if it meant saving someone else. Kyla looked back out the window. I didn't even say goodbye, she murmured. The ship landed at an Allied base near the outer rim. A mix of human and alien officers gathered at the landing pad as Kayla stepped down, carrying her daughter in one arm and the metal tag in the other. The base commander, a tall woman with short gray hair, approached. Are you Kayla of the Relari? Yes. We received a priority rescue signal. Is it true that Corporal Morrow sent it? Kayla nodded. Where is he now? Kayla's voice shook. He stayed behind to protect us. The commander frowned. Did anyone recover a body? No, Kayla replied. Only silence. The commander sighed and removed her cap. Then we'll assume the worst. Don't, Kayla said firmly. He's not dead. Not until I see it with my own eyes. The woman studied her for a moment. Then she nodded. Very well. We'll mark him as missing, not deceased. Kayla stepped forward and handed her the metal tag. Keep it safe for when he returns. Days passed, then a week. Kayla remained at the base, refusing to leave. She tended to Leela, who grew stronger each day. The fever was gone. Her smile had returned. But every night before bed, she asked the same thing. Mama, when will the quiet man come back? Kayla would kiss her forehead and whisper, soon. She didn't tell her daughter the truth. Not yet, because a part of her still believed it. Still felt it. He's alive. Somewhere. On the 12th day, alarms blared through the base. Kayla rushed to the landing pad, fearing another attack, but what she saw instead made her fall to her knees. A patrol craft, small, dented, burning on one side, wobbled down from the sky. It crashed, skidding across the stone. Medics ran forward. Soldiers shouted, and from the smoke, limping, bloody helmet under one arm. Jace Morrow stepped out. His eyes searched the crowd until they found her. Kayla ran. She didn't stop, not when soldiers called out, not when her legs burned. She threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. He didn't say a word. He just placed one hand on her back and held her like someone who had finally made it home. They sat together in the medical wing, Jace hooked up to an IV, his wounds finally treated. His face was pale but alive. Kayla sat beside him, holding Leela in her lap again. The girl reached out and touched his hand. You came back, she said. He nodded, then smiled. Tired, slow, but real. Kayla leaned close and whispered, Why? Jace looked at her, and for the second time he spoke. Because someone was waiting. Tears fell from her eyes, but this time they were full of joy. And now? She asked. Now, he said. I stay. Where trust begins. She had lost her child and was weeping. Then a human found her child, and her reaction was unexpected. Weeks passed. The war that had turned cities into ash was now slowing. Ceasefires were whispered across the stars, treaties signed in quiet halls. But on one small green world, far from the center of politics and power, something else was growing. Something stronger than peace. Something more lasting than war. Kayla now lived in a modest shelter near the new outpost's edge. The soil here was firm, the air clean. Wildflowers had begun to return where fire once ruled. She had planted a small garden behind the home, not because she needed food, but because growing things made her feel alive again. Her daughter, Leela, ran through the grass nearby, laughing for the first time since the day she was taken. Jace stood at the edge of the field, watching. His leg was still stiff and his left arm sometimes trembled, but he was healing. And more than that, he was here, Not as a soldier, not as a savior, but as family. Every morning, Kayla made tea using herbs from her garden. Every morning, Jace came to sit with her in silence. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't. The silence between them was no longer strange, it was warm, full. "You don't have to stay here forever," Kayla told him one day. Jace raised an eyebrow. "You've done more than enough," she said. "You could return to Earth, rejoin your command." He shook his head slowly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out something new, a small ID card freshly printed. She read it. Civilian status granted. Jace Morrow residency request. Relari Human Cooperative Colony role. Defense trainer and community liaison. Kayla blinked, surprised. "You joined us?" He nodded. "Why?" Jace turned toward the field, watching Leela spin in slow circles with her arms stretched wide. "Because she laughed," he said quietly. Kayla smiled. "You gave up your rank, your future, for a child." "No," he replied, "for what comes after her." The colony grew. Not just humans, not just Relari, but both, together. There were struggles, misunderstandings. Old pain didn't vanish overnight, but every time someone hesitated, they pointed to one moment. The day a human soldier gave up everything to bring back a lost child. It became legend. They told the story in schools. They carved it into stone. But for Jace and Kayla, it was never about being remembered. It was about remembering what they almost lost. One evening, as the stars came out, Kayla stood beside the new well and looked up. "You know," she said softly, "if someone told me I'd be standing beside a human at peace, I would have called them mad." Jace chuckled. "But here you are." "Here we are," she corrected. He nodded, then asked, "Do you still miss the old world?" Kayla thought for a moment. "No, not anymore. Because this one, we're building it together." They stood in silence again until Leela's voice rang out from behind the garden. "Mama, Jace, come see what I made." They walked over and found her holding up a drawing, rough and childlike but clear. It showed 3 figures, a mother, a daughter, and a man in a human uniform, all standing under the sun. Beneath it, in shaky letters, she had written, "My family." Kayla looked at Jace. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything, because in that single moment, everything was already understood. Across the galaxy, wars would come and go. Leaders would rise and fall. But on one little green world, in a home, built from trust and second chances, a child laughed, a warrior smiled, and a human stayed. Because sometimes the most powerful bond in the universe is not forged in battle, but in kindness, and in the choice to never walk away.